So who here is familiar with Pippa Pipkin? There are a number of clips where she expressed passion for Colress from Pokemon, and it is so moving! For this reason, I was inspired to build Colress's main Pokemon, Klingklang, PL15. Its primary motive is serving its master, possibly Team Plasma in general, if it has come to see their progress as Colress's own progress. Though I find this unlikely, as Colress always seems to be more concerned about his own research than serving Team Plasma. Klingklang has two complications: no hands or feet. Holding an object is done by grabbing it between two of its gears. Also, Klingklang's steel typing results in it receiving double damage from fire, ground, and fighting attacks. We can extend fire to heat-based damage in general. Ground is going to be a little tricky because we later find it takes half damage from having rocks and metal thrown at it. Ground might include manipulation of mud or sand, perhaps an earthquake under it. Fighting types can be quantified as melee that specifically uses a martial art, melee with a fighting stat at a certain level, or attacks using aura, nin, chi, ki, whatever you want to call it. Some of you are looking at these stats with your jaws on the floor, but allow me to explain. What I normally do is use Psypoke's stat calculator on the assumption that the Pokemon has a serious nature, then chop off the last digit before assigning the number in the most appropriate place. On this occasion, it's led to some surprisingly high numbers, even after I lowered a couple so as to get the point total to a precise multiple of 15. Nonetheless, I stand by this arrangement because in the games, it is conceivable for ordinary Pokemon to fight the so-called gods of their world once they're at a high enough level. Stamina in particular I'm okay with leaving at this height, since steel types are typically more defensive. For those who are not into Pokemon, I left its intellect at -1 since Pokemon that are owned generally have trainers do their thinking for them. Now, I've taken a couple liberties here. Normally, it would have the ability Plus, which raises its special attack stat when a Pokemon with Minus is also on the field. However, none of its moves uses its special attack stat, so why spend points on something you can't use? Instead, I replaced that with Levitation, which is normally not an ability accessible to any Klingklang, but if you look at Klingklang in the anime, it's obviously levitating. Pokemon types have their weaknesses, as I described earlier, but this trades off for one immunity and a slew of resistances. Poison immunity, and I condensed its resistances to Dragon and Fairy into resistance to magic in general. I thought about doing the same with Rock and Steel, but then it gets harder to separate those from dirt. This and its stamina truly gives you the team's wall, that is, if it weren't only 2 feet tall as you saw earlier. Pokemon also typically come with 4 attacks, and these are the 4 that are displayed for Klingklang on Bulbapedia. Your go-to will be Gear Grind. You throw 2 gears at someone you don't like. Wild Charge. You add electric damage to your already incredible strength and use yourself as a battering ram. But you take 1/4 of the damage if you succeed. And this is the part where you discuss with your GM Side Effect 1. And because Side Effect 1 is supposed to only come into play if your attack fails. However, we're bending that to say if your attack succeeds. If your GM is more of a stick in the mud than me, I'd make this Side Effect 2, for self-inflicting damage every time. Giga Impact. Just like with the activation flaw, you skip a turn, only it's the following turn. This one takes the wind out of you. It was at Skills and Advantages I started to contemplate what is unique about being a Pokemon owned by Colress, a researcher for Team Plasma, as opposed to a Pokemon owned by a 10-year-old from insert small town name here. Increased perception, and I was so very tempted to give it just 1 rank of an expertise in science. However, logic dictates it spends the majority of its time in a Pokeball. If experimentation was used to augment its strength, it probably didn't get the chance to hear about what exactly the procedure was. That being said, I still wanted this Klingklang to be a little smarter, so I made it literate. While its native language remains that of an animal, I ensured that it can read, which pairs nicely with its benefit. I've also chosen to assume that if it is trusted to do things for Colress, it would be recognized as Colress's partner, and would therefore have access to the same thing Colress himself would: files, computers, people to operate said computers, likely Colress himself. All the things Team Rocket's Meowth would be expected to have access to. This leaves the question, when would you even use this? If your universe is completely built around Pokemon, then it would serve as an encounter most likely. A watered-down version of this could be a player character. Perhaps Colress sends out a few of his Pokemon to take care of some meddlesome do-gooders. If you like to keep a multiversal perspective like me, perhaps Colress has allowed someone else in your party, maybe Bowser, to borrow Klingklang, believing it to be the most efficient way to handle threats to Team Plasma like Mario. Whatever else happens though, I hope this Klingklang is present in Wedding Art of Colress and Pippa Pipkin.